Hi, everybody. Welcome to Think Tank, where our diverse leaders handle your diverse challenges. Today, we're looking at how to handle white mansplaining when discussing race and racism. I'm your host, Ray P. Ferrer, managing diva at Ray Coach. Won't you join me in welcoming today's stunningly brilliant Think Tankers? Let's hear who are you, where are you calling in from, and what's outside your window right now?
Hi, Ray. Thanks for having me. I'm Kelly Macias. I am calling in from Washington, D.C. I'm an equity, justice, and inclusion consultant and a freelance writer. And what's outside of my window is my backyard and my neighbor's very big German Shepherd who is barking.
I'm Misha Mosley. I'm Dr. Misha Mosley, as my mother would say. I'm zooming in from Oakland, California. What's outside my window is beautiful Lake Merritt. I am the director of the Black Teacher Project, as well as a stand-up comedian.
Hello, I am Robin Ingram, calling in from Baltimore, Maryland. I am an assistant vice president at the Fund for Johns Hopkins Medicine, and I see a lot of great Baltimore rooftop decks outside of my window. It's a great thing to sit up in the city and enjoy a different view.
And I'm calling in today from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where outside my window are an awful lot of dog walkers. Everybody is walking their dog at all times, and the cats who live outside my house are always perturbed by this. So that's what's outside my door. Now, folks, today's challenge comes to us from a leader in a global tech firm, and they write, "Dear Think Tank, since the waves of Black Lives Matter protests last summer and increased media attention on racial justice issues, my team has started having a monthly series of conversations around racial equity. It is the very first time we're talking about these issues, one presumes at work, and most people understand the value of it, even if they've never really talked about race before. I'm one of 3 people of color on my team. I want to participate and share my experiences, but I also find it very frustrating. Each time we meet, one of our white male colleagues interjects with all of his so-called expertise around race. He is married to a black woman and thinks he knows everything, speaking more than the people of color on our team and educating everyone. I'm tired of his white mansplaining and now feel unmotivated to contribute. What can I do? Signed, Silenced, and Demotivated." I'd love to hear your responses, and I'm going to ask that we start with Kelly.
Well, first, my response is woosah. Like, really, I'm sorry. And this could be a chapter written out of my own life because I have experienced this a lot. So, wow. Yeah. Yeah. I guess I would first say that you're not alone, that in my experience, I find often there are white folks who have never thought about race or are just at their beginning journey about race. And so they tend to be the ones who are very quiet in those conversations. And then there are people who may have some lived experience who think that they're woke or who are around and living with and in relationships with people of color. And so they want to add to the conversation. I want to say to you, though, that you have lived experience, right? And so you should feel free to take up space, particularly if you want to, right? And I'm assuming that you want to based on what you've written. So feel free. Your lived experience is not less valuable than someone who has peripheral experience, who has lived experience because of someone that they love and are in a relationship with. That is an important experience, but that is not your experience. And so it would be a real shame for the people that you work with not to actually hear all the valuable things that you have to say and want to contribute as a part of this conversation.
Here. I co-sign with what Kelly just said, that there are different people at different spectrums in the journey and at different areas of experiences and knowledge. And I would say don't give up because they do need to hear your voice and they do need to hear what you're saying. And what you are saying is extremely important. And so really dig deep in knowing that your voice needs to be heard, and don't give up. And even if that requires having some time before the meeting to get in the right mindset and space, and then having some time after the meeting where you can also kind of recover, understanding that these are exhausting a lot of times, that you need to give yourself the space to prepare and get in the right mindset, and also the space to recover and rejuvenate yourself too.
Absolutely. I mean, I love this idea of getting your mind right. And for me, much of my work is around racial affinity and really having conversations in the context of shared experience. And so one thought that comes to my mind is what coming to a topic like racial equity, what that means for people based on their identity. And there's a lot that's been written about white folks coming into sort of racial awareness. Immediately, one thing that came up was and I wish I could remember the exact source, but this idea of the white person that wants to be the savior or the good white person, right? And so it seems like this person might fall into that category. But overall, I think one thing that's coming up is to look for resources that you all could read as a group and engage in as a group that is about your behavior. So when I think about giving people feedback, I think about what did you say and what did you do? And so you don't have to go directly after this person. Maybe it's a text that you all take up in one of your conversations about how white people behave in multiracial spaces, something like that. But I feel like this is not to like make everything great for him, but just to like allow you the space to show up as your full self, but also check him in a way that's not necessarily about it coming from you. And then, just to go back to this getting your mind right, really grounding in why you're doing this work and understanding that you stand on the shoulders of those who came before you, and really tapping into that strength as you navigate this 21st century version of this.
Thank you. As I appreciate each of you and your input here, and just I want to say something that's messy, because the one button that gets pushed for me repeatedly as somebody of mixed race is when an actual white person, not somebody who looks white, right, is taking up inappropriate space in a room. So it gets to me. And I'm also the person, because I'm seen as being in between the two worlds, people of color and white people, the person who gets picked to talk to that guy, right? And I'm tired of him. And so I just want to say, we used to, in a gay Latino group I used to belong to, we used to joke about people who thought they were Latino by injection. That's rude, I'm just going to say. So, but when people believe that when white people believe that they have some kind of greater understanding or knowledge because they are related to someone who's a person of color, it's a wreck from my perspective. So that's something that I just wanted to say out loud, and it's infuriating when that happens. I want to double down on check him, because I feel like that's... I'm all for you, person who wrote this in, and I want you to do all the things or have all the right to express yourself and get your needs met from this gathering and do the work you are meant to be doing. And someone needs to talk to him directly with that direct feedback at some point. So whoever that needs to be should be clued in on what you and others are experiencing in the room. So it doesn't have to be you, but it's often, it's best done by a white person or a person who's taken for white. So sometimes that's the person who can say it more directly and more take no prisoners than the person of color who's experiencing it. So that's just something I want to add to the mix, because this behavior derails and it's really annoying.
Right. I think that also speaks to the need to make sure that people have safe spaces to even share that. So there needs to be a safe space to share that this colleague is stepping on toes or stepping outside of bounds or in some ways being offensive. Because if you don't have that safe space or that safe person that you can share with, then you're just feeling like you're kind of enclosed and not able to get it out in a way without being concerned of any backlash or the things that we shouldn't be concerned about, but we end up being concerned about.
Mm-hmm. And when you say that safe space, it also makes me think about like group agreements around how you're going to be. And because this is a monthly conversation, again, we're blessed to live in the 21st century. Much of what we need is on the internet. So somebody somewhere has a list of community agreements or, how to have conversations across difference. There's something that you can draw on that could kind of get to this around equity of voice, particularly in racial justice conversations. Like, I feel confident if you Google that, some stuff will come up.
It's a good idea.
Thank you. And it's not everybody speaks equally. It's not that, right? So like because it's about racial justice, so it's not share all the space. That's not safe, right? Sorry, Kelly.
No, I was actually going to say, and it makes me wonder, is it necessary to have a cross-race conversation? Maybe that's not the place where this group needs to start, because we think that, there's so many things happening right now. And, in my line of work, I get tons of requests. We want to talk about race. We want to talk about race. And I think that's wonderful. And I always ask lots of questions about, are you ready to talk about race? Are you talking about race as a cross-racial or multiracial group? Are you actually trying to do affinity groups, perhaps, where white folks talk to white folks and maybe BIPOC folks talk to each other or Black folks talk to each other or Latinx? I mean, like those are things that I think are really important because cross-race spaces aren't always safe. And so I think we also just have to acknowledge that. The other thing I wanted to say was to Ray's point, I really wanted to double click, highlight, cheerlead for it around the allies, right? Because in my experience, white folks hear things differently when it comes from me, but when I have trusted, skillful white folks who are willing to intervene and talk to other white people about their impact, it actually has much more resonance. And so I wonder if there is someone in your team that perhaps you may trust to be able to say, this is having a particular impact on me. And if that person could intervene, not necessarily for you, but for that person to say, hey, this behavior, how you're showing up and white mansplaining everything is problematic and is actually shutting down people from the conversation.
Well, we've talked about a lot today, and there's more to talk about. As always, I want to keep going with these conversations, but we also want to let you get back to the rest of your life. Thank you, ThinqTanqers, for your time today. We heard about our ThinqTanqer who's in this racial justice conversation needs to have safe space to raise her concerns and fully participate. Turn to allyship and turn to other folks if necessary to communicate to the person who's engaging in this behavior. Get your mind right. Sometimes that's prep and follow-up, prep and recovery. Sometimes it's thinking about who you're going to be or how you're going to approach the room and what you want to get out of that conversation. So much more in our conversation. Be mindful about how a safe space is being constructed and for whom is it safe? Is this designed to be a cross-racial discussion? Do you start there, or do you start with affinity groups where people who are like can sit together and talk first? Make mindful decisions about that. Thank you for your time. And if you have an issue that you want us to discuss, send it to me at ray@raycoach.com and we'll have at it. All right, take care, ThinqTanq, and we'll see you soon.